I know we're going to talk about a pretty exciting topic today, retiring early, but I wanted to really kind of focus this on the 7 things no one tells you about retiring early. And I think this is important because obviously 2022, we had the Great Resignation, people retiring early. We know about 66, 67% of Americans actually retire earlier than expected because of disability. Maybe they're getting laid off, maybe, you know, circumstances happen. So I think this is a really important topic to let our clients know, hey, you can retire, but do you have the means to do that? And then what else do you need to know if you have the means? There's other things we want to talk about as well. So I know the first one here we want to kind of talk about is the medical cost. Medical costs can be so sky high, and it's that sweet spot. It's like 60 to 65 before you can get on Medicare.
Right.
It can be $1,000 a person a month.
It can be very high, and I love this topic.
Yeah.
We sit down, we work with clients, we do financial planning, and one of the things that we do as a firm is when we provide a financial plan, we actually bake in the expected cost of Medicare, because a lot of planners don't do that. And what's fascinating about that is if you are one of these people that wants to retire early at 50 or 55 and you're on the fire train and you want financial independence, retire early, good, go for it, that's great. But you have to be aware of the fact that Medicare does not kick in until age 65. So if you are going to retire at 50 or 55, the cost of healthcare is on you. And so that has to be something that you factor in. We can show you, project what that cost could be once you get to Medicare, but then we also put in there what that cost will be, and it is not cheap. That's one of the costs or expenses that are going up significantly, almost double digits every year.
Oh, it's so bad.
So that's one thing that you definitely may want to talk to an advisor about, talk to your planner about is, hey, once I retire and I don't have that insurance from that company anymore, where am I going to get insurance? How much is it going to cost?
Right. Yeah. I mean, costs are high. They're high now. If you're looking to retire 10 years from now, we gotta account for that.
For sure.
We have to. I know the second thing here too is Social Security. Right? We don't have access to it. Earliest you get is 62. You can defer all the way up till 70. But if we're retiring in our 50s, 55, 56, we don't have access. We could have a 7-year spend down before we even have access to Social Security.
Right. And then when you're taking it at 62, you're taking it at a much discounted rate from full retirement age, which is 67. So if you're turning it on at 62, your benefit at 62 is not your benefit that you would get at full retirement age 67. And then, of course, there are some people that even want to defer, or they think they want to defer to 70. And I really caution people to be 100% sure. We were just talking before the show started that oftentimes the differential of that 3 years, it takes you to age 84 before you actually are recapturing those 3 years that you did not take it, even with the higher amount. And don't forget that that means that's 3 extra years you're spending down all of your money. And so there's that loss. But not only that, you then also, if you were taking it, what could we do with the money privately that, you know, instead of letting the government decide, well, we'll give you an 8% roll up. And again, I just stress as an attorney that the Supreme Court has ruled that Congress can modify, amend, delete, or cancel Social Security at any time, really, for any reason, not because so the Supreme Court doesn't believe in Social Security, but just because that is the way the law was written in 1935 to give Congress a very broad swipe at modifying the program however it would be necessary in the future based on demographic shift changes, income changes, all kinds of changes. So for us to defer income that will take, for 3 years, that will take us until 84 just to break even, we're really putting a lot of eggs in the basket of believing that they'll continue to give us that 8% increase. And what if they don't? Do we have any recourse if they don't? I mean, we had taxpayers sue the federal government before because of Social Security, and they lost because Congress has the right. That legislation is so broad that they have the ability. So just be careful when you're planning on a 70 deferral that it actually truly does make a lot of sense for you.
Well, and we don't ever want to give blanket advice. And I can't tell you guys how many times we've all heard it.
When should I take Social Security?
No. Not only that, but people will come in and they already know, I'm not going to take it until 70. They have this clear notion, I'm not going to take it until 70. I'm going to retire at 60. I'm not going to take it until 70. That's 10 years of drawing down your personal funds before you access something that you've paid into. we have to have that 10-year spend down plan in place.
And that's why the planning process is so important.
Yes.
Is to sit down with your advisor and we can actually forecast what that looks like.
Yeah.
Because so many times people have ideas and theories that, oh, I'm going to do that, we're going to do that, until the actual financial plan is done. Yeah. And we realize that that may not be the best alternative. Mm-hmm. There are other alternatives that are out there that will allow you to maybe not spend down your stuff if you're entitled to this benefit. And let's not even talk about spouses too. We can get into spousal benefits and Social Security as well, and that could be another hour-long segment that we put together.
Right.
But it's important that if you are thinking about retiring early, sit down with your advisor, take a look at all your assets, liabilities, income expenditures, and see if that makes sense. But realize there are some very big pitfalls out there that if you aren't aware, can sink your retirement.
And a lot of the loopholes in Social Security have been tightened up in the last 5 years. So file and suspend, and a lot of these things have just been done away with.
Yep.
And people really need, very specific, individualized advice on Social Security. So it's impossible to make a blanket statement. All I can say is that taking it at 62 is really dicey, considering how much you lock in as a diminution in total value forever. You're locking in probably, if you live until, you're locking in thousands and thousands and thousands of lost income if you go at 62. And we have the data from 2021. We saw that 35% of men and 40% of women in 2021, we don't have the 2022 data yet, but 35% of men and 40% of women did file at 62 in 2021. Wow. So that's almost half of women, and over a third of men are filing early. And it's like, wow. I mean, wow.
And I think, honestly, Rebecca, a lot of that comes because folks are not doing any planning. Yeah. They're not sitting down with an advisor that can show them empirically it does not make sense to do this at this age. There are other areas, other pots of money, other financial tools that you can use to allow you to wait till at least your full retirement age.
Right.
And then have that benefit, not be stuck at that deep discount.
Right.
Yeah. Rebecca, Mac, it's so important to kind of see, we know that the average age for women and men, people are living longer, well into the 80s, sometimes even 90s. We've even seen people live into their hundreds now.
Oh, for sure.
So we might have, with Great Resignation, people retiring earlier, we might have a huge problem with people now needing that retirement income to last 30, 40 plus years.
Yeah, to touch on that statistic, I was reading recently that a couple age 65 today, there is an 85% chance that one of those two people will reach age 90. Wow. So that's today. So if you're thinking about retiring early, so you're looking at that, if you retire at 65 and you're making it to 90, that's easily, 20 plus years from that point. But if you're planning on retiring at 55, you've just expanded that period substantially, and you're going to need substantial assets to maintain that lifestyle. Could you work differently? Could you do different things? But it's very important for folks to understand that longevity is something that is scaring a lot of people because folks have this idea and they understand what the retirement accumulation side looks like, but you have no idea what the retirement decumulation side could look like. And if it can last as long, if not longer than the accumulation side, you've got a lot of planning that you need to get done.
Yeah. I mean, because we could be looking at a way longer horizon.
Easily.
I mean, we know, Rebecca, Social Security, when it was first enacted, not to bring Social Security back into this, but we knew the average age of everyone was living, 66, 67, so they were maybe getting Social Security for a few years, if that.
Right. I mean, that's how the program was designed. The program was designed to literally pay people out for really less than 10 years. Yeah. And it was mathematically viable because it was only to pay people out for less than a decade. Right. When you go from paying out people for less than a decade to paying everybody for over 20 years, it's just mathematically insolvent. It would have been insolvent from the very first day had they calculated in 1935 everybody living to later 80s, early 90s. And so that's really the problem. I mean, we have a program that we tactically don't collect enough taxes to support for everybody for 20 plus years. And that will dictate at some point, and I'm not saying this to baby boomers because I believe baby boomers will be completely grandfathered under the current system, but certainly for Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z, we absolutely have to expect massive overhauls to Social Security because it is fiscally required.
Yeah, and it's important. I know the next one we want to really talk about is the rule of 55.
Yeah.
So can you guys explain that to our viewers, what the rule of 55 is?
A lot of people don't understand this rule. This is a tax rule, and it's specifically talking about if you have a 401k or an ERISA governed plan. So there's other variations, 403b, 457, blah, 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 if you work for a city, state, school, local, hospital, whatever. So there's a bunch of ERISA governed plans, also TSP. And if you retire from your work plan and you retire and think, okay, I'm retired, I'm 55, I retired early, let me take my 401k and roll it to an IRA, then you've got this BAM 10% penalty from 55 to 59 and a half that will apply for any distributions you take from an IRA. However, under ERISA governed work plans, so employee-sponsored plans, there's something called the Rule of 55 that says if you separate from service at 55 or after, anytime before and up until 59 and a half, when the 10% penalty goes away and you all can access your retirement funds, it waives that 10% penalty as long as those funds are held in an employer-sponsored plan. So if you don't have a financial planner who knows these nuances of the tax code, we've seen it, a lot of financial planners will recommend that you immediately roll over their account to the IRA so they can start managing it for you because that's what they want. They want to help you and manage it for you. But what we would do with our expertise level is say, hey, you know, we've got 4.5 years here before we're able to withdraw without a 10% penalty. Let's determine the cash flow that is necessary for these next 4.5 years, and then let's leave at least that plus a buffer zone for, you know, diminution of value in case we have some losses. Let's leave that as a buffer in the work plan on the work platform so that we can exercise and make use of Rule of 55, whereas if you go to the IRA, it's over and you're back to 59 and a half.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that because I met with a potential client last week and they were like, Shannon, I want to roll my 401k over. I just got laid off. Awful situation. Obviously, we're seeing a lot of unemployment, which not great. But he's like, I want to roll my 401k over. I need to get better management under this. And I said, okay, do we have enough cash flow right now to sustain your lifestyle? At least basic expenses. Because if not, we might want to keep that 401k or at least some of that over there because you won't have that 10% penalty. You'll have tax on it, but not that 10% penalty because once you roll it over to an IRA, so taking a 401k, rolling it to an IRA, you're now going to have a 10% penalty plus the tax.
Right.
And he was like, I had no idea.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
The big takeaway from this conversation that I love, twofold. One, find an advisor or advisory firm that is planning first, not product first. Extremely important. Two, the ERISA-based plans, it's a literal alphabet and numeric soup. 401k, 457b.
There's ERISA lawyers. That's all they do is just ERISA.
403b, you know, 419a. There's tons of them out there. We have advisors at our firm that can sit and talk to each and every one of those. I've been in the business 20 plus years. You have as well. Find an advisor that can look at all the stuff that you have and give you guidance to make sure that retiring early, one, makes sense, and two, is viable. I think it's extremely important.
Financially feasible.
And I want to talk about something that's kind of near and dear to my heart because my parents, my father, he retired from his first job, 55. And he had to, it's kind of rolling into our next topic here, is the 72T. The advisor he was with said, hey, let's roll that money into a 72T and we're going to take equal distributions. He's going to still work part-time because he was too young to retire. Plus he works 90 hours a week, so he's a workaholic like me, so I get it. So he was like, okay, I'm going to roll it over to 72T. I'm going to get these equal distribution payments. But he did it, and I said, Dad, that's not a retirement plan. That's not a plan. It can be a great strategy if we're retired and we need equal payments, but it's kind of locking you into something until you might not need to access that money. You could have left that money on the 401k platform, but that advisor just wanted to get that money under management and do a 72T.
Wow. Wow. I just have to jump in here and just interject because, that makes me so mad. But I will say, I mean, so frustrating. What that advisor doesn't understand is that those distributions are so small, Shannon, as you know, because people don't understand. 72T is a rule that allows you to access in equal distributions your pre-tax planning account minus the 10% penalty, because you're taking a series of payments that are essentially the same over a course of time. What people don't understand is that calculation goes to your mortality age. So even though you're 55, the calculation is for a series of payments as if you were going to take it up and through until mortality, which makes the payments usually quite small, which basically makes it very unworkable, usually for any kind of financial plan. The great thing about our firm and our expertise is because we do have the legal capacity in-house, we know other legal ways that you can stay and remain employed yet still get access to your funds if you're married. And the greatest thing about that, if we can get that process done for you, is that you're able, at the point that the funds are coming out of the employer-sponsored plan, you're actually able to take a distribution without a 10% penalty. There is a window of grace that allows you to take distributions with no penalty, even if you're still employed and even if you're still contributing to that ERISA plan. So that's an advisor who just doesn't know the full scope of the legal process in the United States of America. And I would say most advisors don't, because it's very rare to be both a lawyer and a financial advisor. And we will leverage all the tools and all the knowledge that we have to help our clients the best way possible.
Yeah. So we've already kind of gone over medical costs, Social Security, 72T, accessing your money at 55 if you're retired with ERISA plans. I want to kind of jump now into more of the ageism in the workforce, because that could be a huge issue where if we're retiring early and say we just want to go back to work, we want to get a high level paying job because we're like, you know what, we're bored, we want to get back to work, that could be a huge impact. We see the Great Resignation happening, we see people laying people off. So I want to kind of bring that into this topic here, where if you retire earlier than expected and maybe you want to get back to the workforce because you're bored, you thought you wanted to retire but maybe you didn't, that could be a huge impact.
That ageism is a very interesting point, because a lot of times folks look at the ageism from the other perspective, where someone's too young for a job and you're not experienced, and those are the factors. But it can be a double-edged sword, where you have someone who may be a little bit older, and because they're now getting into this space where they feel they should be, it may not necessarily be that fit, and now it's looked at from a different perspective. All these are very important factors. I think the soft factors that aren't necessarily financial when we're looking at retiring early is, okay, typically everyone else in my cohorts is here, but I'm not because I got out of the game at this point in time. Then you have to look at all the different things that may have changed, and technologies and all the advancement that come up that you may not necessarily be in tune with because of those steps that you made. So yeah, I think ageism is a big one. It's not just the side of being too young, but maybe on the other side, maybe a little bit too old.
Well, I mean, this is a huge topic, and all I can say about this topic is we're talking about the total disruption of humanity and humanity's productiveness for GDP. And I'm sorry, but I'm looking at this from an economic perspective. So what I'm talking about, and I will really just encourage all of you to go to my podcast, Crashes and Taxes, because I have a podcast. It's one of two parts. The first part dealt with the rise of AI. And for those of you that are older like me and Mac, and even older, you'll appreciate, Terminator from the 80s, where we had the rise of the machines. And of course, that was so, we thought, futuristic, but that's really where we are. When you really understand how far advanced AI is. A lot of people assume that AI, like you've already seen the Jack in the Boxes, the Burger Kings, there's already implementation for robotics to take over all fast food. That's coming fast and furious, less than 10 years, you won't see humans at all. But what's really happening that people aren't understanding is that AI is actually going to take over everybody's job, everybody. And I'm talking about, we've got robotic surgeries, laparoscopic surgeries that are going to replace all the surgeons, the neurosurgeons, lawyers. My job's going to be gone, because even though I have 4 college degrees, and I think of myself as someone who has all this knowledge and experience combined, and I certainly try to leverage that for our practice and use that all, there's no way I could ever compete with an AI database that has digitized every legal decision from every civil court case in America, that can then, I can go into an AI bot and say, I need to argue that my client wins because this legal point, this legal point, and this legal point. And of course, I would know that as a lawyer. And I can say, write the brief and bring in all the court cases. And literally within a matter of probably less than 20 minutes, I have an entire full legal brief with the court cases supporting. This is where the technology currently is. Yeah. It has not been released to the public. It is in the process of being released to the public. ChatGPT is the very beginning through the OpenAI platform and infrastructure that this is coming. Microsoft obviously bought OpenAI and now is monetizing it for maximum profit. But this is where we are. So if you're going to think about leaving your job early and you are sort of, Gen X and older, you really do have to consider the skill set that if you had to return to the workforce, what would you be bringing? And then as an employer, someone who hires people all the time, I can tell you that one of the concerns, we think of it in both ways. We think of this person is too young and doesn't have enough experience, and no one has a problem thinking that. We all think that you got to pay your dues and getting experience in life. But then on the other side of the coin, when you're looking at an older person, you've got this great breadth of experience, but how long are they going to want to work for you? I'm only going to get 2 or 3 years out of this person? Is it enough for me to invest into them for only a 2 or 3 year return? What about their parents? What about their lifestyle? So there's all kinds of things as an employer that are going on. And so I would just say regarding ageism, just really understand your skill set that you bring and be able to have a plan to market yourself if you have to get back into the workforce.
Yeah, and I want to bring up the last one of our 7 things that no one tells you about retiring early, and that's your physical fitness is so important. It's just as important as the finance piece. Yeah. Keeping your mind active, having things to do. I tell clients all the time, I'm like, hey, do you have hobbies? Because you're work. Do you have the hobbies that are now going to take up that time?
Right.
Yeah. And just to put a cap on that, that's usually the biggest thing that blows up an early retirement is overspending. Is just thinking, oh yeah, I'll do that, and all of a sudden,
I'm going to shop all day.
Half the hobby, and your whole plan blows up. So that's, in a nutshell, that's one of the biggest ones.
Yeah. Don't pick up sailing in retirement or golfing. I mean, if you haven't spent those expenditures all along the way, try to pick something that's not so expensive.
Pickleball. Pickleball's a good one.
There you go.
I love pickleball.
Exactly.
Absolutely. We've got to be careful with those go-go years because we can go through the money way too fast.
Yes, exactly. But it's just as important to keep that mind active.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that I always tell clients, hey, finance is great. I want to make sure you have something to do
with your brain.
With your
you have
brain.
to engage. Your brain is a muscle. I mean, I've had so many people that just do crossword puzzles or Sudoku or whatever they're doing, but engage the brain, because you will turn to mush. It's a muscle like anything else.